Hey guys, this is episode 28 of the Rugby Recap. You have myself, TheRugbyRecapYT, as well as the Kiwi lads. How you doing, mate? Just an absolute... Did you enjoy the finals and the third and fourth playoff?
I mean, the good news was both of the games were close, and that was the main thing that a lot of people were after. One game split by 3 points, one game split by the one. Of course, the Springboks walking away with their fourth Rugby World Cup title.
Yeah, no, I mean, to be fair, I think both games were actually pretty good. Again, it was very low scoring actually compared to what we both thought what we would see, in terms of our predictions. But hey, no, I mean, going off the third and fourth playoff, we'll quickly just touch base on that. Not into too much detail because again, the main one is the final. But of course, this score was 26 points to 23. The English did win at the end of the day, beating the Argentinians for the second time now in this competition. Obviously, the first game now and the last. So. But yeah, no. Again, I think. What do you think of the game overall? Because again, England were seen as favourites, but the Argentinians, I think they could be, I guess, somewhat proud of their performance in this one, and definitely throughout the tournament. So yeah, what was your take on this game?
Yeah, I think both sides showed quite drastic improvements compared to the first time that they met in the Rugby World Cup. England, of course, not being able to score a single try in that first outing, getting themselves two there with Ben Earl and also Theo Dan. And then the Argentines, they were only able to score very late in the contest in that first round, but improving on their score, getting 23 points. Unfortunately for Los Pumas, though, it just wasn't quite enough up against an English side that still showed that when it comes to those final moments, if they can get it just that little bit more right, it's going to be one of those ones that I think England have got a bright future around the corner. We saw some younger players step up in this matchup, which I feel like is the way forward for the English. The likes of Marcus Smith at 15, he does look like he's going to be a really outstanding player for the English moving forward. Ben Earl, just always going to bring you that massive amount of physicality and passion. And then also Sam Underhill returning into the side and actually doing very well for the English, leading the tackle stat.
Yeah, no, it's actually interesting because with Underhill, he was always, he was actually seen as one of the best, loose forwards, you could say, from the previous World Cup in 2019 because he played for the English pretty well in that tournament. But and this one, he just hasn't had as many minutes. Again, when you have Curry, Earls, and Quinny Laws, it's pretty difficult to kind of get ahead of them three. But again, it's interesting to see what they'll do for the future because Underhill, how old is he now? He's still pretty young for what it is. Like, he can probably play another World Cup.
He's a weird one, isn't he? Because he does seem like he should be older than I think he actually is.
Yeah.
I think he's been around for a while, but Sam Underhill, he is actually only 27 years of... Yeah,
there you go. Yeah. So he can play another World Cup
around the corner.
Yeah, so it's one of those where I think with the English, they have a lot of players, like you mentioned, who can definitely play in the next World Cup. Like Marcus Smith. I thought Theo Dan was pretty impressive throughout this one. Definitely, in my opinion, I see as the next hooker for England. Yeah, it's kind of crazy to think because it's not just Owen Farrell who obviously is now kind of leaving, I guess, the international stage. I mean, we've also seen Dan Biggar as well as Johnny Sexton. So it feels like a lot of it's a big era really with them three obviously leaving, but. But again, from an Argentinian perspective, another player who's kind of played this final game was Augustin Crevi. So yeah, it feels a bit weird that he's now gone. But and also Nicolas Sanchez as well. Can't forget to mention him. But again, within this game, I thought the Argentinian. I like the Santiago Caceres try. I thought it was pretty good from him to kind of work his way around the English defense. But again, he just unfortunately gave the ball. Well, it wasn't he gave the ball away, but it was blocked by Theo Dan, and he kind of pounced on that moment and. Yeah, again, Sanchez, the Argentinians kind of they got their way back into the game, but unfortunately Sanchez missed that final penalty and just made it obviously where the English won at the end of the day. So yeah, I think both sides can be definitely proud of their performances. I think throughout this World Cup, I don't think it's a harsh thing to say that we didn't expect these two sides to make the semifinals. It's one of those where I think a lot of people would obviously it goes really back towards the draw and how things kind of turned out. But most likely you would have had Ireland, France, New Zealand, South Africa probably as the four in the semifinal. But but for these two sides that even have that experience going to the semifinals and playing this third and fourth playoff, it's definitely good for a lot of these players who are still up and coming. But yeah, no, again, who was your kind of a player of the match, if you want to say from both sides, but who was your player of the match?
See, for England, I feel like that work that Sam Underhill was able to do put him right up there for myself. I mean, we saw some other players stepping up quite nicely for the English, looking at that back line, you look at what Marcus Smith was able to do in terms of the assists that he was able to create and the opportunities that England were able to use there. But yeah, I've become obsessed with tackles throughout this Rugby World Cup. I think a lot of the time I've gone with the guy who's leading the tackling stat just because they look like the busiest man out there on the field. And in these physical close games, it's normally those men who are getting to the breakdown, who are keeping possession for their side, that are really helping them over the line in the end. So yeah, I'll probably go Underhill. For the Argentines, I feel like Santiago Carreras was certainly up there. Of course, it was unfortunate that his kick was charged down by Theo Dan, who, fun fact, was the first player to miss the tackle on Santiago Carreras when he did score his try.
Really?
First of the 3 players, he was. So he made up for that, got the try back straight away. And yeah, in the end, I'd say Carreras still very solid game. I thought Kubeli was a lot better in this game compared to what he was in the previous fixture that we did see him in. Of course, missing that last game. Instead, it was Gonzalo Bertrano. But yeah, Kubeli looked like he had improved quite drastically in this game as well.
Yeah, no, I think you have it spot on, really, the players you said there. There's not really any player that I can think of missing out in that sense. I guess, you could say Ben Earl. I thought he was pretty impressive, and Theo Dan for the English. But yeah, look, I mean, yeah, just it was a good game. Again, not really the one that I think most people were tuned in for this week, but one of those where definitely good to see that these two just finished on a high, really, for this tournament, and was able to kind of just produce a bit of rugby for their countries. But again, we're gonna move on then towards the final now. This was the big one, the big game of the Rugby World Cup. Springboks versus the All Blacks. Yeah, South Africa, obviously, Box became victorious, beating them 12 points to 11 by, again, a 1-point margin. Who would have predicted that? Again, I think in our predictions, we went with, do you remember your prediction for this? I can't remember. I think I said 2018, if I'm mistaken, for my one. But I
was a little bit high. I got a bit excited. I was hoping that we were going to get a running game of rugby. We did not quite get that. The weather, unfortunately, was as bad as it was anticipated. And both sides kind of played that little bit more accordingly.
Exactly. And it's one of those games where really, when you look at the first half overall, I mean, I'll be honest, I think for the first 10 minutes of the game, I thought South Africa were in complete control. They didn't have the All Blacks. Again, if you look at the stats, of course, we'll definitely make a mention of that. Where the All Blacks, if you look at the entire game, they definitely controlled the stats in terms of possession, territory, and all of that. But yeah, I think for those first 10 minutes, I think South Africa definitely had the territory and possession. But of course, it soon changed after that. And yeah, within that period of time, there was I believe there was a yellow card for Shana Bazell. And yeah, again, the South Africans were able to kind of take advantage, getting 2 penalties in that period of time. And but again, yeah, I think Mwanga had a penalty which he converted for the All Blacks. And then of course, this is where the big moment of the game kind of happened and really just changed the outcome, really, of the whole, what everyone was kind of hoping to see or kind of expecting to see. And yeah, obviously with that Sam Cane red card, well, again, it was a yellow card at first. And when I look back at it now, I understand why I got upgraded to a red. I'm not really against it, but at the same time, it's a final. It's also not in my opinion, I don't think it's a clear and obvious red as well. I think that's it's one of those where when there's a clear and obvious red, we're like, oh, you can't defend that. It's just this one. I was like, I think it was just a yellow. I think it was on the threshold of it's definitely a yellow card. When I didn't see it, by the way, when it first happened. I had to see the replay, when the team looked at it. I was like, okay, well, that looks like a yellow. He came somewhat from his side, hit the face. Understand why it's a yellow card, but then the red, I was like, oh my gosh, I was in shock. I was like, that this really just changes the game on its feet. But what was your take on that?
I think that if you're going to tackle that high, you deserve to get yourself at least 2 minutes in the bin.
It's true.
Just duck. That's all you need to do. Okay. But yeah, I can understand why it was a red. I actually thought it was a red. At the end of the day, when you look at that one compared to Khaleesi's, I can see why Khaleesi's was just a yellow. Whereas
yes, I agree with that.
Red card. Yeah. But there was maybe that little tiny bit of mitigation you could say for Sam Cane with the fact that Jesse Kriel's head was ducking down just a tad, but it wasn't we've seen worse cards given as a red throughout this Rugby World Cup.
Yes.
And we've also seen much worse than that given as a yellow. So it was one of those ones that, just tackle around the bootlaces. Old school. You
I
can't
understand.
get penalised, unless, of course, you don't wrap your arms around the legs. But, yeah, go low, and then you don't have to take that risk.
Yeah, no, it's just one of those ones where, I mean, yeah, again, when that happened, of course, the tide kind of swinged a bit towards what everyone thought would swing towards the Springboks' favor for the rest of the game. But no, the All Blacks held firm. I mean, again, when it came towards the end of the first half, it was 12 points to 6. So yes, the Boks were ahead, but that's where the All Blacks kind of came back into it really in the second half. And to be fair to them, I think they controlled most of the second half. I think from a set piece position, I think for the whole game they were the much better side, particularly from the lineouts. I mean, South Africa had no response really for the. I think New Zealand might have stolen like 4 lineouts, maybe 5 in the game, somewhere around there. I think South Africa maybe had 2, but it didn't seem like they had 2 to be fair, because I think the All Blacks just controlled that lineup with ease. And then when it came towards the scrums, I think both sides are pretty balanced, I'd say, overall. Like, they're actually, correct me if I'm wrong here, was there a scrum penalty given in this game?
Don't believe so.
I actually don't think there was.
I know that near the end of the game, there was that little bit of the controversial moment of, was it going to be a free kick? Was it not going to be a free kick right at that 80-minute mark? But yeah, other than that,
there wasn't any penalty.
I can't think of any penalties. Was there a free kick in that first half at scrum time?
I can't think of it.
I don't think there was.
I literally think this is the first time in a while I can't remember a penalty being given from a scrum, which is, I guess that's a good thing in a way, because it meant that the game was a bit more progressive. I mean, like just kind of allowing the teams to kind of play up from the backs and getting a few run meters in for both sides. Definitely more for the All Blacks, but yeah, I guess in terms of that second half overall, we had the disallowed try actually from the start, and I think it was Aaron Smith actually. But again, they kind of, to be fair, this is the one where I was like, it's definitely not a try, because I knew they dropped the ball earlier on. So I was just wondering, why are they continuing? But then again, I think literally in the space of 2 or 3 minutes after that disallowed try, the All Blacks got their try, and it was through Bud and Barrett, of course. I think that was one where Cheslin Kobe was literally the only man open, or the man on the right hand side, and yeah, they just used the man advantage they had, and yeah, it was well work, really just a well worked try for the All Blacks. I mean, what was your take on that one?
Yeah, I felt like that was the moment in the game when Sia Khaleesi got his yellow card that the All Blacks they realised this is now the time that we've got to go. And they kept on kicking for the corner. They kept persisting. They got close multiple times. But yeah, just that one try being scored by the All Blacks. I saw an interesting stat to do with the Springboks. Of course, they've been in 4 Rugby World Cup finals. They have won all 4, but they have only played, of those 4 games, one of which they have actually scored any tries in.
Exactly.
Every other final has been penalties. And, I mean, it's certainly a Springbok side that I think the quarterfinals, the semi-finals also proved it. They know how to win by sometimes the barest of margins, but they know how to just get there. And they proved it in this game again. Like you mentioned, the stats were against them. But, I mean, there were certain players who stepped up, which, of course, we will get to in a moment. But someone had probably the best game that they ever have in a Springbok kit for this Rugby World Cup final.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of players you can set up for, but yeah, I guess just to conclude the game before we get into the players, like the final moments I think of the game really was that Jordie Barrett kind of penalty which he had. I forget how the penalty was awarded. I think it was just more of an offside call or something like that. But again, besides the points, Jordie Barrett had a penalty on the right hand side near, I think it was 49 meters out, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, again, we've both seen this countless times in Super Rugby where he kind of nails these with ease. And again, like I guess the more I think about it, like after the game and had a bit more time to think about it, I remember more penalties he's taken from the left hand side actually than the right. I'm not sure if that makes a difference, but maybe you're a bit more comfortable maybe on one side. But again, he did screw it just wide of the post, and yeah, it's heartbreaking for him, because obviously I saw his reaction after the game. He was just devastated, and as he would be. But yeah, look, let's get straight into the players of this game. So you got to mention who was the standout player for you, I think, in this game.
Well, it was of course the number 7 Pieter-Steph du Toit. The physicality that man brought all by himself was just insane. Like the fact that he was forcing so many different players back. Mo'unga almost got snapped in too when Pieter-Steph du Toit drove straight through the middle of him. He put in the big hits on
Yeah.
Barrett. Every breakdown, you saw Peter Stiftatoy lurking somewhere, ready to make that next challenge, ready to put that pressure back on, and also having a few decent runs along the way as well, Peter Stiftatoy. So, yeah, definitely a standout performance from him. 28 tackles made, which is absolutely insane for a final. And I believe it was Israel Dag was talking about it on the post-match show for New Zealand, and they talked about Peter Stiftatoy in terms of his mindset. And he said, I can't remember who the teammate was, but it was someone in Japan, and he said to them, I don't have to be the best player on the field, but when it comes to the guy across from me, I have to outwork him. And I feel like that is exactly what he did throughout this game. 28 tackles was much more than anyone else was able to make throughout this game. And even though the Springboks, I mean, they had to make over 200 tackles, I'll be honest, the 7-1 split, I don't think it had that same impact as it did have in that first game up against New Zealand. But that was down to the fact that there was a bit more of a prominent kicking game from the Springboks. The All Blacks, they weren't as fatigued as the Springboks would have liked them to be near the end of that game. And I think that it was actually the Springboks who had to go to the bench first because of fatigue, rather than the All Blacks who did stick it out for that little bit longer and did look like the fresher side throughout that second 40 minutes.
Yeah, no, I actually agree with you that I think when it came towards the 7-1 split, like, there's a bit of, like, I think at times it worked, but also it didn't work because, again, they had to use Dion Fourie very early in this game because, Bungi Manami unfortunately had that injury. And if I'm not mistaken, did he come back into the game? I don't believe he did.
He did not. It looked like he almost did because of how much he was jumping around on the side.
Exactly, yeah.
No,
so, but yeah, no, they also had to use Dion Fourie for from the, let's just say from like the 10-minute onwards, just for the whole game. So like that definitely wasn't in the plan because I think most people would have predicted that Bungi Manami would have actually started this game. I think played most of the game. Actually, he would have. He has the ability to do that. So it's one of those where I think that definitely hurt the Boks. I think, particularly from the lineouts, because you could tell from the lineouts who were just not the definitely not the best in that way. But no, in terms of I guess the 7-1 split overall, I mean, the scrums I don't think it made much of a difference because again that's where the 7-1 split kind of comes into it, like where you want to win the set pieces, but both sides weren't able to win anything from the set pieces. So it didn't really have it didn't have a say from a scrum factor, which is obviously where the Boks kind of prevail most of the time. So the All Blacks in that sense did very well to kind of not counteract them because counteract means he beat. Like they did well to neutralize them in that scrum, but yeah, I guess in terms of who else came on? There was like Willie LaRue, Quokka Smith. I mean, John Klein. I mean these guys did well just for I guess giving the other players rest. But besides that, yeah, I mean it wasn't like the 7-1 split like changed the game, but it just did its job. I think that's what it was. It just did its job. And yeah, again, when you look at the other players who kind of stood out in this game, I thought, gosh, I mean, there's a list of players. I mean. I guess from the backs, Flafa Clerk I thought was absolutely brilliant. He was great, actually. I mean, there's a few times where I was a bit questionable, like where I noticed where he actually individually went for it. Like whenever they had like a line out or two, he would try to snipe in through the side. And I was like, why are you doing that? Like you're just giving the ball straight back, and it's like there's no support. But again, nothing came out of it. I guess in that sense, that there's no harm, no foul. But no, overall, I think he was just all over the place with Flafa Clerk. So he's definitely up there, I'd say, for one of the player of the matches, I think. I mean, is there anyone else? I mean, the centers, I don't think really made much of an... there wasn't like a stand-up player. I mean, Kobe, Curly Lorenza. No. I mean, is there anyone you can think from the backs?
Balimza probably was the other man who should get that little bit of a notable mention. Having the most running meters out of any Springbok player with 65. Just really being in the right place, right time at the back, having some brilliant cover defense. And then also he was leading that offloading game for the Springboks as well, having 3 throughout the contest, trying to keep that ball alive, not allow it to go to the breakdown, and try and get that counter-attack going. Yeah,
I mean, I thought the most impressive thing actually was the locks in this game, because I think like for both sides in particular, like I think like, Franco Mostert and Ebenet Smith were pretty good for when they played together, and then you obviously for the All Blacks you had Retallick and Barrett. I thought both of them were outstanding. Again, when Whitewell came on as well, they shift Barrett obviously towards the 6th spot, and yeah, it still worked out. So I think for both teams, I think the locking department was pretty good and solid. I think throughout the game, but yeah, from the prop perspective, I mean, yeah, the props just did the. I mean, again, like, there wasn't much you there's not like a clear man of the match. I think it was just, the clear man of the match is definitely Peter Toy, but there's not other players that stood up, maybe towards his level. We can say he was a contender for the thing, for the award. But yeah, again, like just now that the thing is now done now, South Africa now being back-to-back champions, joining the All Blacks, of course, in that sense, and claiming that fourth World Cup. Just what does this mean now for the future? I guess because we're gonna probably, by the way, guys, do maybe a whole episode, maybe like, I don't know, maybe this week or maybe next week. It could be actually this week. We'll see what happens, but we're gonna definitely discuss the whole Rugby World Cup in itself and just what we think of it entirely. But just what's your take on, for both these sides in particular, just going just now, just for the future, because Jacques Sneijder obviously is now heading back to Munster. We have Ian Foster, obviously. Well, he was already going to not step down, but there's already a successor for him with Scott Robinson. So what's your take on these two sides?
Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of changes before this next Rugby World Cup, because of course we've got the full 4-year cycle now for these sides. The last one was pretty disrupted, of course. Massive thing happening in the world between 2019 and 2023. But now there is going to be a time where there's the rebuild. There's also going to be new depth being found for these two teams. A lot of the older players stepping down so that the young guys can then get that opportunity as they make their way forward. New coaches in the mix as well. But yeah, it's going to be exciting times, and I'm curious to see how these two sides go in the next Rugby Championship. Of course, still seems like it's a little bit early to be talking about that, but it is only around that 6 months away, and if the World Cup is anything to go by, it's going to fly by. At the end of the day, we're going to have the Super Rugby, the URC competition, so we will still get to see these guys in action, and then getting into those mid-year internationals for July as well, which should be very entertaining indeed. I think the Springboks have already confirmed that they are taking on England in one of their matchups.
They're going to take. Yeah. I know England already announced they're doing. It's New Zealand, Australia, and South Africa, I think. So yeah,
they're going relatively hard, the English in that department, and I feel like there's a lot to be learnt in the next 12 months or so in terms of how these rankings, of course, we saw quite a few changes throughout this Rugby World Cup. Are we going to see them start to even out again as we progress through the next couple calendars years? Now, one side that has struggled big time in terms of those Rugby World rankings, of course, is Australia. And the reason I bring them up, Tim, I wonder whether or not you've seen the news.
I wasn't going to mention this now. I was going to say we could do, but let's just do it now. Why not? I mean, Eddie Jones, he's resigned. It's incredible. I get like the question was, the real question is, did he resign, or was he like said, no, you can have the option to resign if you want to, or it's one of those like where, but I don't know what this means now, because like it's one of those where, is he now going to do what everyone said he was going to do and go to the Japan? Or does he kind of just rest for a bit? I don't know what's going to happen here, because again, like I was with a family friend recently, and he's South African. We were making kind of the funny joke. Actually, said, "Hey, what if Eddie Jones came to the box? What if he was because he was part of the box set up in 2011, in 2007. I mean, with Jake White being the head coach at the time. So I guess he's used to being that thing. But again, I don't see it happening. But is there a team you see Eddie Jones coaching, or other than Japan? That's probably the best question to say it. Is there another team besides Japan you see Eddie Jones coaching?
Well, like you said, Japan is the obvious option, isn't it? But I honestly feel like Japan are in a decent position at the moment that they don't really need Eddie Jones. Why would you want a guy who has given a side the worst possible result that they could have had in a Rugby World Cup and their worst ever finish in a Rugby World Cup competition as well? It makes you wonder whether or not there was a foot out the door to start with. Yeah. It was pretty much something that people have been saying the whole time. Has Eddie Jones already got his feet halfway out? The answer was yes. He was going with a very young Australian side. Whether or not he really cared about trying to build for the future, or whether or not he was just looking for that paycheck to then bugger off back to Japan. But if there's any other location that Eddie Jones could go, I mean, I feel like that's the thing. A lot of the coaches, well, that's the thing though. Borthwick, I feel, hasn't done too badly for the English. Yes, there was some questionable
No, I think
selections.
Borthwick now, after what we've seen from this tournament, I mean, I think he is now seen as the guy for the English. I don't actually. I think there's a lot Borthwick can actually do now with this English side. So if you're an England fan watching this, guys, I do think you should be very excited and just for what the future can bring. Because again, we've seen that he's been able to kind of implement his style of play from Leicester Tigers back in the day and just bring it towards this English side. So I just think it's good. They have a lot that they can build and all that. So I think he's definitely going to send England job. But
Warren
Eddie
Gatland,
Jones.
I feel like he, throughout the Rugby World Cup, also proved why he should be Wales head coach. Like, Wales had a very good World Cup, I feel, compared to what some people did anticipate. Whether or not there's a job going in Argentina, maybe.
See, this is the thing I was going to say, by the way. And I think I've mentioned this even before to you in our previous pod, or at least in another video. I think Michael Cheika should be the coach for the Wallabies. I think he is the main guy to do it. I think he's the clear choice for me. Like, if there's a favorite to do it, he's the one. I think he was so successful with the Wallabies when he obviously did coach them for the 2015 World Cup and a few years afterwards. But I just think he's an excellent coach, and he's proven once again that he took this Argentinian side to a 4th place finish, which is, hey, to be fair, it's pretty good actually when you think about it, and what he's been able to accomplish with the side from even before the Rugby World Cup and the victories they've had in that space of time. I think he's a coach I think Australia should look into. Again, I've seen people mention Steve Hansen, of course, because he's still seen as many people as the best friend or the whole thing of Eddie Jones, but no, it's going to be interesting. Like, is there a guy you believe could maybe be another candidate for this Australian job?
Well, for the Australians, I think they need to look a little bit further up their chain than the coach is the main problem for their rugby at the moment.
Okay.
That's all I'm going to say, but it does seem to be that they could switch coaches in and out all day, all year, but unless something changes for Australian rugby, the decline could just be beginning. That's a harsh statement to say, but there's some things that need to be fixed, and I think they've got to fix them soon. They've got a World Cup at home. They've got a Lions tour. We want to see the Wallabies of old. They used to show up to the games, play with passion, play with excitement, and look like a side that can be world beaters. But at the moment, they do look like they are pretty much world beaten.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
That's about the best pun I've got for being up for about 22 hours. So
fair enough. But I mean, if I had to just on the spot, you don't have to give your explanation, but just on the spot, if you had to pick between Jamie Joseph and Cheika, who would you choose?
Well, Cheika's got that previous experience, doesn't he, for the Aussies? Jamie Joseph, it's a little bit uncertain where he actually wants to go at this point. It does seem to be that, he's pretty open to whatever comes around. But I think out of those two, they would go back to Cheika just because he seems like the more viable option. But, maybe they think, we'll just completely change it to another new coach and see whether or not that can work out for us. Maybe they feel like they do need to start from scratch, and maybe Jamie Joseph is that guy that can help the side do that.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think if there's like another coach. I mean, again, I just thought of one, but I'm not even sure if he would do it because again, he's only just come back to New Zealand. But there is Joe Smith. He was again part of the whole coaching group with Ian Foster, and it's one of those where do you think he'll? I don't know. Would he go to Australia? I think it's a bit of a bold call to say, but maybe. He could. I mean, he's a good coach. He's a good coach, so it's not like a bad shout. What would you say? Do you think he's a candidate?
I don't know. I feel like he's a tricky one as well in terms of where does he want to be situated.
Yeah.
At the moment, Australia, it's a tough job. Whoever goes there knows. I mean, they've seen Eddie Jones, what he has done. The good news is they don't have a World Cup just around the corner, so they've got a little bit more time to be able to develop strategy, develop plans of how they're going to move forward. But yeah, it's not an easy job. It's not one that is highly sought after anyway at the moment.
Yes,
there's not many
that's
coaches
for sure.
stepping up going, give us a crack. Go on, Ian Foster. Have a little bit of a go with the Wallabies then.
Ian Foster. Whoa, that's that's actually
no, he's not touching another coaching jersey, unfortunately.
Is he not? Has that already been announced?
He probably will coach like Ghana or someone if they'll have him. But other than that, I think Ian Foster, he won't be too keen on taking up another big side. I don't think. I think he's pretty.
Yeah, fair enough. Foster. I mean, I actually just feel bad, because again, I've only heard it recently, but just all the, I guess, the criticism, but particularly towards his family. I've heard a lot of people. See, I think that's a bit too far to do. I mean, I understand obviously because we have to be fair that we gave Ian Foster criticism during the time. What was it? 1 year ago. There was a purple patch, I think, of 3 games, something like that, where we were like, "Whoa, this could be the end of it." But at the same time, we've all deep respect for Ian Foster in terms of what he's been doing for this All Black team, and so I feel bad for him in that sense, because you never wanted to go down. And I feel that may have an effect, obviously, and like you said, maybe if he doesn't choose to go into the scene again, because maybe they feel like they don't want to have that same experience once more. But I mean, in terms of other coaches, I mean, I don't think he's even in Canada, but Brad Ford, he's been coaching the Reds. Maybe put his name up in the conversation, but anyway, we'll see what happens, obviously, from that standpoint. I believe the awards are going to happen very shortly, so we'll know already more the people who've been given the awards, or it's still to come. We'll see when this podcast is released. But yeah. Anyway, guys, just hope you guys really enjoyed this these last few episodes, because our journey for the Rugby World Cup it's kind of over in terms of talking about the competition on a whole now. But again, we'll probably do one more, I think, episode, just kind of giving our whole debrief just about I guess maybe just what's the future for a lot of these teams. I think that's what maybe we'll do. Besides that, hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Make sure to like the video, guys. Make sure to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Check out our respective channels. And we'll see you guys next time.